Hi YouTube and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am talking about Instagram Insights, but particularly how I use Instagram Insights to inform my content strategy. Now, Instagram Insights is a topic that lots of people find interesting, find confusing, aren't really sure how to actually make the most of. And so I thought it would be really helpful to create a video to actually show you how I use them. Now, if Instagram Insights is a topic that you want to learn more about, then don't forget to check out this video right here and this one above it after this video, where you can learn more about the insights that matter in 2020, and you can also see an even deeper dive of what the insights look like behind the scenes as I take you through more of a kind of look at what you can find in Instagram Insights. But now let's dive into my own Instagram Insights and how I use them to create a really effective strategy. So now we're looking inside my insights, and this is what I can see. Now, if we're going to look at it tab by tab, we've got content, activity, and audience. Now, the first thing to say is that the audience tab, I don't spend a lot of time in here. It can be helpful, broadly speaking, to understand what my audience looks like, what the demographic breakdown is, the split between male and female, but it's not something I spend a lot of time focusing on. In terms of the follower section, where it shows you when your audience is most active on the days and times, again, this is probably more helpful if you have an audience in particular areas of the world to understand when to engage with them and post on your Instagram feed so that you can reach the most people. However, if specific regions and areas of the world don't matter to you, if you are an online business, let's say, or your business is based where you are, then I wouldn't worry too much, because generally speaking, the activity of your audience is going to reflect your activity. So now we jump to the activity tab. Now, your interactions and discovery, generally a bit like your follow activity, it generally reflects when you are most active, particularly on days when you are engaging. Now, you should have proactive engagement as part of your strategy. So if there are days when you have this as part of your schedule, let's say you do it on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, you are very, very active and you go out and you engage with your community and others, you will probably see your discovery spike on those days as well. So it's worth just checking to see whether that does reflect accurately. If it doesn't, then there might be something else going on. Maybe you're posting on those days rather than engaging on those days. But if you are engaging on those days and it's reflected in your discovery, then great, it means it's paying off. Reach is an important one to keep an eye on. However, I actually keep an eye on reach on a post level. I'll talk more about that a bit later in this video. But profile visits, great. We always want to be increasing these week on week, as we do with website clicks. So now we jump to the juiciest tab of all, and this is the content tab. This is where all of that lovely content that you are creating and sharing, this is where you find the insights, the analytics for that. So the first thing I do is I click on posts, I click on see all. I want to have a look at my main feed first, and then I filter it by through 30 days and by comments first of all. Now, bearing in mind, as I'm speaking you through what I'm thinking and the analysis I'm making, I would be making a note of this somewhere on a piece of paper or in my tracker or my spreadsheet. So I'm just going to talk to you about the thoughts that I'm having and the conclusions I'm drawing. But when you do this for your own content, make sure you are making a note of it somewhere. So as I said, comments is the first thing I look at. And just to give you a heads up, what I'm going to look at are comments, shares, saves, website clicks, follows, and reach. So the first thing I look at is comments. Now, what I can deduce from this is that the top 3 posts for comments, 36, 34, and 32, I've got 2 with 32 comments. I look at the content and I notice what the content is about. So this first post here, it's about success, and ultimately that success comes from lots of failing over and over and over again. So, okay, talking about success and failure, good to know. The next post is a carousel post. This is one of my educational, informative posts. And that's good to know that generated a lot of comments. When I actually look at the caption, it's interesting to see that what generated a lot of comments was potentially the post format itself, but also the caption that I included. So here I talk about money, I talk about investing. This is a vulnerable, honest caption for me where I'm talking about the amount of money that I've invested over the last few months in different programs, which is a total of around £4,000. So, okay, another honest, transparent, vulnerable caption there. And finally, the other post that has generated a lot of comments is a picture of me. And again, it's an educational caption coupled with a post of me, which is interesting. The carousel post we just looked at was an educational post coupled with a vulnerable, honest caption. But it's not a huge surprise to me to see that a picture of me has generated a lot of comments across the board, no matter what industry or niche you are in. Broadly speaking, images of a person, images of the person behind the brand or business or Instagram account generally helps to drive comments, because seeing the person behind the brand helps build relatability and a one-on-one connection with that person and with that account. So I'm not surprised to see that this has generated comments, but it's good to know that talking about money and talking about success and failure, those are two topics that I know generate me comments. Now we go into shares. Now here I can see that I got a whopping 29 shares, which for me, with around 700 followers, is really, really good. So I got 29 shares on this post, again, about success and how it has nothing to do with perfection, but passion, persistence, and patience. Again, I know success is a good topic for me to talk about. Not only does it generate comments, but it generates shares. Again, I've got posts with 444 shares. Again, talking about success. That does really well for me in terms of share. And I see that the type of post, that text on a colored background, that is incredibly shareable. So again, good to know. Things that I was aware of, but it's good to have that assumption verified by my analytics. Now I'm looking at saves. Now I know already, based on my experience on Instagram and for my account, I know that informative, helpful pieces of content where I'm educating about Instagram, I know that those generally drive saves, and that is verified here with my content. So carousels in particular, here I can see they're a format that really do drive saves. And particularly when I'm talking about Instagram advice, I'm talking about content strategy, how to create Instagram content in less time. I'm talking about relationship building on Instagram, and I'm talking about why just consuming free content isn't the way to a really robust strategy. So I'm sharing my expertise here, I'm sharing my advice, and it's generating a lot of saves. People can come back and reference this content later. So I already knew that. I had a good idea that those types of posts drove me saves, but it's good to see here that the format of a carousel post is also helping generate those saves. Instagram TV, so IGTV, what I've noticed looking at comments, shares, and saves so far is that generally speaking, they're not doing so well for me. Now, I've only shared, I believe it's 3 IGTVs so far. It might be 4. They're not doing so well in terms of those metrics, but I'm not going to discard it yet. It's just something to keep an eye on, that perhaps IGTV isn't for me. However, having only shared 3 of them so far, I'm not going to discredit it. I'm going to keep going, because 3 posts, 3 IGTVs isn't enough to make an accurate analysis just yet. Now we're going to skip to follows, because this is a good indication of the kind of content that is encouraging people to actually want to stick around and hear more from me in the future. They value what they've seen enough to actually hit follow. So let's have a look at follows. So over the last 30 days, it is the time. I'm going to look at the top 3 here. So the carousel posts, again, they are doing well for me. One of them generated me 4 follows from strangers, another generated 3. So again, I know that sharing my expertise for me is a really key way to build my following. And also picture of me. Now that picture of me, as you remember from before, that was coupled with an educational, informative caption. So again, I know that this education, this expertise sharing is really valuable for me to grow my visibility and grow my following. And a picture of me, it helps to put a face to the account. That might not have generated me as many follows had it been a carousel post or a text on a colour background. Maybe it would, we don't know. But it does prove to me that showing up on my feed is a key part of growing my following. Now let's have a look at website clicks. Now this is helpful to look at because it is good to know what posts are encouraging people to actually leave the post they're looking at and click the link in my bio. Now let's have a quick look at that. Now, Of course, if you are saying in your captions, head to the link in my bio, you may well see a very clear correlation between that call to action and between the amount of people, the number of people that clicked on your website, or you might see a spike in website clicks. However, I am a big believer, and I say this a lot in my videos, you should not in every single caption be telling people to check out the link in your bio. You should be keeping the engagement and the activity on your account rather than saying to people, check out the link in my bio. So for me, I'm not somebody who says to people a lot, check out the link in my bio. So that's why it's quite interesting to have a look to see what posts have encouraged people to actually go and find out more about me. Maybe they're looking at my services, maybe they're looking at what I have to offer. It depends what is in the link. Right now I have a link to my Insights YouTube video that I talked about earlier. So let's have a look. Okay, so the IGTV, that actually did drive website clicks, but that's not a huge surprise because that video shows a preview of the YouTube video clip and it tells people to check the link in my bio. But one that is a bit of a surprise is this first one here, Mistakes Make Magic. Yes, there was a bit of it was an educational caption. I talk about how people can actually find out what their audience wants. But, you know, again, sharing the expertise, again, it encouraged people to find out more about me. In terms of reach, I am a big believer, and this is what I do, and you can do whatever feels right for you. I actually like to keep an eye on my reach on a post level. So the reason I like to look at my hashtags and my reach on a post level more regularly than the other insights I look at is because I want to know how a set of hashtags performed on my last post so that I can mix it up and try something different or not with my next post. You don't want to wait to analyze your reach once a month, because that means that you are not actively looking at how your hashtags are working on a regular basis. And that means that potentially you are waiting a whole month to actually look back and see that this set of hashtags you weren't using weren't working very well. And that's a whole 4 weeks of not doing anything about it, not fixing it. So I really encourage you to have a look at your reach on a post level, because then you can see, okay, that set of hashtags worked really well for me. Okay, that set of hashtags didn't work so well. What can I do differently next time? So now, having looked at the last 30 days worth of content, what I am gonna do while I'm here is I'm gonna have a look at the last 3 months worth of content, because just looking at the last 30 days isn't a totally fair analysis of my content, because some of those posts I've only just shared in the last week. And so they don't necessarily have a fair amount of engagement yet, or they haven't necessarily reached as many people as they could have done. So let's look at comments first. Okay, so pictures of me. Now this post is it is my most commented post from the last 3 months. And funnily enough, that post is me talking about money, really openly and transparently. So I really do know that talking about money is something that really is going to help me have a dialogue with my audience. It's going to build that connection with them. So money is definitely something I'm going to talk about moving forwards. As I said before, it's not something I've talked about a huge amount. Now let's go to shares. So what I am noticing from this is that carousels do well for shares and saves. I can see a carousel as the second most shared post over the last 3 months, as well as a couple of others there about the algorithm and the other carousel that we talked about just a moment ago. So I'm going to definitely continue with carousels. Interestingly, one of my IGTVs, one of my older IGTVs, has actually driven the most shares I've had, the third most amount of shares I've had over the last 3 months. So maybe I'm not going to discredit, I'm not going to discredit Instagram TV just yet. And that is why, because actually the Instagram story about the IGTV about Instagram mistakes drove shares for me. So that is a reason to not completely scrap it just yet. Now looking at saves, this is interesting because I know that educational, informative content drives saves. This isn't just for me, this is for people and industries across the board. But what is interesting here is that my most saved piece of content over the last 3 months is this lovely carousel here. Now, it's one that I haven't done in a while. It has a flowery background. It's one of the older style carousels that I left behind to change up in terms of design for a new style. But as that's been one of my most saved pieces of content over the last 3 months, I might just bring that back and I might tweak what it looks like a little bit, or I might just tweak the caption. But here is a great example of repurposing something that did really well before, and maybe there's a slight way that I can change it to reshare it and get more saves moving forwards. Now let's look at website clicks. So the picture of me talking about money very transparently, that drove website clicks, as did the mistakes make magic, as we saw in the last 30 days worth of content, that drove website clicks. But interestingly, and this is interesting, and this is why you shouldn't necessarily wholesale scrap an idea, but rather see what's been performing well and then think about how you can tweak it. This post here, it didn't perform very well for any of the other metrics. For the comments, the saves and the shares, it didn't do well at all. It got 4 website clicks. So funnily enough, even though it didn't get a whole host of engagement on the post itself, it did drive people to check out my website, to check out the link in my bio. And I don't believe I even told people to do that. No, that wasn't my call to action in that post. So just goes to show that sometimes you don't get the full picture when you're having a look at your insights on a post level, or when you've just posted it and you're looking at what you can see superficially. Now, what I will quickly say, just before I jump to stories, is that you might be sitting there thinking, what do I do about the posts that I can see at the bottom? If I scroll down, for example, a metric like the follows, I scroll down to the bottom and I see that there are certain posts there that haven't driven any follows. What I will say is that, as you've seen with every metric that we've looked at, the posts have swapped around. There have been some clear winners for shares, saves, comments, follows, and website clicks. But in many instances, you will see that here, for example, where there have been no follows for success has nothing to do with perfection and everything to do with passion, persistence, and patience. Funnily enough, that did get shared a huge amount, but I actually didn't get any follows off the back of it. That doesn't really worry me. It still helped me get exposure. It still helped get my name out there in front of more people. It's a little bit surprising that it didn't drive follows. But what I'm trying to say is that just because a piece of content doesn't perform well for one metric doesn't mean that you should scrap it entirely. What you're meant to be looking at here is for trends. So if you see a certain type of post isn't performing well over and over again for any of the metrics, then consider scrapping it. But what I would say is don't scrap it after the first 30 days. Have a look over the last 3 months. And if you can see that there are 1 or 2 or 3 posts that consistently perform badly, they're not getting any kind of engagement, they're not getting you any follows or website clicks, then it might be time to scrap those posts or those types of themes or topics entirely and move on to a different type of content. Now let's have a look at Instagram stories. Now you might be relieved to hear that there are only 2 real things that I have a look at when I'm looking at my Instagram stories analytics, and those are replies and retention rate. So let's have a look. Let's go back into my insights and let's have a look at stories. Now, it's really important to note that your Instagram insights for your stories will only last for 14 days and then they disappear. So you definitely need to be checking in on your stories more regularly than your main feed content posts. So definitely make sure you set a reminder or you just remember to go in and have a look at your story insights regularly. So first of all, let's have a look at replies. Now, replies are important because they show you which of your stories are actually getting people to take action and to send you a message off the back of the story. Now, of course, like with your Instagram main feed content, if you are including a clear call to action in your content, asking people to send you a message, then you may well see a correlation with the amount of replies that you get off the back of that. And you do, as much as possible, want to be giving people an action to take. Getting people into your DMs is the best way to start building relationships with them and turning them into customers and clients. So really, really, really do that. Start doing that if you're not doing that already. But for me, I'm going to have a look at my stories over the last 14 days. And I'm going to see what ones have generated replies. So let's have a look here. So here, my story about my article for Iconosquare, that generated 2 replies, and actually it was 2 people saying, "This is amazing, let me check it out, where can I find the link?" So I know that sharing my expertise is a great way to generate replies, but what I have noticed and what's really interesting, and I wanted to share with you because it really does back up the point that I make again and again, that personal stories are important. You should have more of your Instagram stories being helpful, informative, and telling people how they can work with you or buy from you, but there is a place for personal Instagram stories as well. You can see here on my stories that the Instagram story about my Dyson, not only did that generate a whole load of people clicking on my poll sticker, but it also generated people, it encouraged them to send me a message. So that generated lots of replies, as did my chilled Sunday Instagram story about the book I'm reading and the beer I'm drinking, as did, if we scroll up, as did my Happy Thursday segment of my story that featured me and Winston the corgi. That generated replies. And I think, yeah, so those are the most replies I've just pulled out there from the last 14 days. And those are from the more candid, the more personal, taking you behind the scenes of my life Instagram stories. So again, I know this to be true, but it's good to see there again and remind myself that sharing more of my life, sharing more of my behind the scenes, it really does help to build that connection with my audience, and it encourages them to send me a message. Now, finally, retention rate. This is really, really important to keep an eye on, because your retention rate is the percentage of people that stick around from the beginning of your story to the end of your story. And I'm going to put a quick calculation here on the screen of how you can figure out your own retention rate. I can't remember it off the top of my head right now, but essentially, as I said, you figure out how many people were watching your story at the beginning versus the end, and that decrease, that difference, that will help you figure out your percentage rate. Now, the way that you figure this out is you look at your reach on Instagram stories. Don't look at impressions, because impressions could be one person looking at the same story a few times. Maybe they went back to have a look at the story that you shared. Have a look at reach, because that is the singular individuals who looked at your story and stayed around from beginning to end. Now, again, Instagram Insights doesn't necessarily tell you clearly what your first story was of that day versus the last. You will just have to remember that, okay, that was when I started the story and this is where I ended it. Now, let me just show you an example. I know that this story here was the beginning of a story that I shared a couple of weeks ago, and this one was the end. So I started with 116, I ended with 91. I did the calculation yesterday. I believe that's around 78% retention rate. I will correct it on the screen right now. But I remember when I did the calculation yesterday, it was a good retention rate, generally speaking, for me. Now, a good retention rate is based on you. You are the benchmark. So you need to keep an eye on your retention rate so you can always make sure that you are improving upon it. So for me, I think it was a 78% engagement. Retention rate is good for me. So that was great. But there are certain stories where the retention rate hasn't been so great. And so I know, what can I do next time? Was it the type of story I shared, or was it that the story that I shared wasn't a very good story? In other words, it didn't have a clear beginning, middle, and end. Beginning, middle, and end is really important for your stories. If you don't have a clear beginning, middle, and end, people will drop off, they'll swipe away. So that's all for this week's video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope that was helpful. Even if obviously you are in a different niche or you are in a different industry, you're offering something completely different to me on Instagram. I hope that being able to see how I look at my insights and the analysis I make and the conclusions that I draw will help you to do the same for your own account. Obviously, you know your content and your audience better than anybody else. So you will have to take that information and then use that and apply that to the conclusions that you make looking at your Instagram insights. But it's really, really important to just make sure that you are looking at your insights on a regular basis and not making sweeping generalizations or assumptions based on what you think is happening on the post level, on those superficial stats. Because actually, as you saw in today's video and me looking at the insights, it's funny how some of the posts that you might not think have performed so well actually did do well for other metrics. And so maybe it's not worth scrapping them completely. However, if you are seeing trends and you're noticing themes and topics that just aren't doing well across the board, then definitely think about removing them from your content strategy if they haven't performed well, certainly over the last 3 months, and think about including something new or doing more of the stuff that is working. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe and bell button so you never miss a new video when it goes live every single Friday. I will see you next Friday for a brand new video. Thank you for watching. Bye.